Welcome, everyone. This is Our Travel Experiences. I'm your host, Kyle Rasmussen. And this week's episode, I'm talking with Jeanine, who is a travel writer, blogger, and who recently went on an amazing trip to the national parks in Utah. So she shares about that, as well as some of her other travels. It's a great conversation. So sit back and enjoy the episode. I hope you all enjoy.
So I've always been a skier. So I'd always been to Utah in the wintertime and hit several of the mountains in Utah to ski. But I've never gone without, winter experiences. So this was my first kind of like spring, summer experience. So if you're planning on a road trip like this, I wanted to tell you that the temperatures get pretty hot in June. So if you're going to do this epic road trip like I took, we started May 3rd and we had to wear, jackets at some of the parks. We were cold, but we had the right equipment, the right layers. And then towards the end of the trip, as you get like closer to Arches, it's really hot. So, depending on the kind of traveler you are, the safest time to go would probably be the spring. But the unfortunate side is that when we got to go to Zion, we didn't get to do the Narrows. So have you ever heard of the Narrows, Kyle? It's like this hike that you sort of walk in like waders. Have you ever heard of it?
I don't think so, actually.
Oh, so it's one of the features of the park in Zion is to literally walk like this kind of it's not a river, but it's just called the Narrows, and there's water in there. And you wear like waders and you hike in waders, and it's epic. It's beautiful. But we weren't allowed to go because there was so much snow in Utah. I had heard there was like 900 inches of snow
Oh my
that
gosh.
fell. And so it's still there on the mountain. It's starting to melt. So when we were there, we weren't able to do the Narrows, which is one of the things that, most people like to do, because it was just the water would have been over, basically over my head, like I'm 5'2". It would have been up to my chest, and it would have been really unsafe. So they wouldn't let anybody hike the Narrows. And then Angel's Landing is another unbelievable hike that we didn't end up doing. You need a reservation. So you got to do a little research. The Angel's Landing, we just thought was like, maybe we weren't up for it. It's really steep. It's really dangerous, but apparently it's like the thing to do. But we found plenty to do in Zion, and we hiked a bunch and saw some amazing things. And then we went on to go to Bryce, and Bryce was cold, but beautiful. And we did some serious like hikings in the canyon. We hiked down from the rim and into the canyons. And, basically it's a kind of like create your own adventure. Like what are your skills? How good of a hiker are you? There are easy, there are moderate, there are strenuous trails. So we did, the gardens of, the Queen's Garden. We climbed all the way down into the canyon. We saw the Tower Bridge. These are all natural formations in the sandstone that occur from water, and water and sand and wind and erosion have created these sculptures and they're just mind blowing. And so, every day we picked a different area to check out. We hiked, and, you just have to be sure that you understand what your abilities are, and take breaks, pack food, do that kind of stuff, water. And then, the last national park we went to was Arches. And one thing that I thought about, Kyle, when I was hiking around was the age level of the people that were there and the ability level. And I saw people with family members that are in wheelchairs. And the thing that's great about our national parks is you can still see the parks. You can go on shuttles, they're free. At Arches, they don't have a shuttle, but you can take your own car in, and you can still see amazing sights from the rims, and you don't have to hike if you're not able to. So I thought that was really kind of cool. It kind of struck me because a lot of beauty in this area, and you can access it. So But at Arches, we did do the big climb to Delicate Arch, which was absolutely stunning. But we started it at like 10 in the morning, and by the time we were done, we sat there and we checked out the arch and we took pictures and stuff. It was hot. It was probably around 95 degrees.
Oh,
So, you really have to plan it. You got to be a planner. If you're not a planner, I don't know what to tell you, but you make sure you have a lot of water. But by the time we got to Arches, it started to get really warm in Utah. And so you hike earlier in the day and you take breaks or whatever. But it's worth it. Arches is the highest concentration of these kinds of arches. They're over 100 million years old.
wow.
And so and some of the parks have petroglyphs, which I thought were incredible. And then to see that in person, to sort of look at the drawings of the peoples, native peoples that came before, just incredible.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I mean, I know I've seen pictures of the different national parks, and they all look amazing there in Utah. Especially arches like the Delicate Arch. That's a famous one that we always see. But to actually see it in person has to be just another level.
It really is. And the La Salle Mountains still snow capped. And so there's at one point when you like sort of climb up and you see Delicate Arch. And Delicate Arch is, it's a climb. I mean, 480 feet of elevation gain, and it's kind of rock all the way up. So, it's challenging. It's really not easy, but everybody, all ages, were doing it, even little kids. And when we got up there, you could see the mountains through the arch, and
Oh wow.
I mean, it's amazing. And unfortunately, we weren't there in the evening. There's no camping inside of Arches, but right outside, we were in a campground. But if you get a permit, if you are a photographer, you can get a permit to go in and, photograph the moon by these arches. It's insane.
Those have to be amazing pictures.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I was traveling with my brother and my sister-in-law and my husband. And, we're all in pretty good shape and we're all, hikers. We hike in Rocky Mountain with them. But, you really have to prepare yourself with whatever you need for the day, pack sandwiches, pack snacks, pack water, make sure you have layers so that when it does warm up, you can peel them off and stick them in your pack. So you just have to be smart about it. But it's such a worthwhile experience because, the United States is just a wonderland. Thank God
Oh
for
yeah.
Teddy Roosevelt that he saved all these amazing parks. There's like 417 national parks now.
Yeah. I love. I've gotten to explore, a lot of the different national parks and monuments, and it's just some of the prettiest land on the planet. And I'm
Yeah.
really glad that it is, protected.
Where have you been that you thought was just amazing?
Oh, actually, Teddy Roosevelt National Park, I think, is very underrated. It's a very pretty park. Um, but I really like the Grand Canyon. I mean, that just looks like it's not even real.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what else. I really like, Yosemite is amazing. I live just not too far away from Mount Rainier, so seeing Mount Rainier is always fun.
Yeah. I was in
Um,
the Cascades in March. So, um,
yeah, I was just reading your article on the Bainbridge Island wines.
oh, you were? Yeah. I mean, Bainbridge Island is pretty special. Have you been out there?
It's been a long time since I've been out there, but yeah, I don't live all that far away from there.
Well, you're really lucky because, gosh, I mean, that was really amazing trip. I loved it. And while I only got to do just one day on Bainbridge Island, I'm definitely going to return to your neck of the woods because Seattle is incredible. And it's my kind of place because I am an outdoor person. I love hiking. I love snowshoeing. I love skiing, but I'm also a culinary person and a wine person. So you guys have it all out there. Incredible.
Yeah, I agree. In the wintertime, you definitely have all the winter sports that you can imagine. But then you also in the summer, I mean, you have all the agriculture, all the wine, the beer, anything that you're looking for, it's out there. Lots of great hiking as well. So yeah, I definitely enjoy like having been able to travel. I've been to every state and having been able to see a lot of the country. I definitely put up the Pacific Northwest towards the top for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And that was my first trip, and it won't be my last. I think I'm going to head to Alaska. I'm already brewing a trip for next June. It's funny, you get back, I don't know if you're like this, but I get back from a trip and I'm like, we got to, we have to see more,
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost an addiction. It's, if you're a
Uh-huh.
traveler like we are, we're like, that was great and I love that, but I need to see what else is out there. So I do see a return trip for myself to go back. We did take a side trip to Lower Antelope Canyon, and that's a slot canyon. And so we did that when we were at the first park at Zion. So we had my brother has a Jeep that he pulls his camper with. So we were able to detach that and take the Jeep and go into Arizona. It was about a 2-hour ride, and it was totally worth it. I mean, we literally climbed 75 feet down into these beautiful, like it's like sandstone. So it's like pink and white and curved from the water that, they say flash flooding is an issue. So, water comes in and floods the canyon and like, whatever water does, and then wind. And then when it's dry, you're left with this sculpture underground. And you walk through it. It's almost like when you're a little kid and you're going through a fun house or something. And it's, I mean, mind blowing. It's just like, you just can't believe. And you turn the corner and you're like, oh my God, that's a beautiful thing. I need to take a photograph. And then you turn the corner and you're like, oh my God. So, you could end up with, thousands of these photographs of that canyon. It's led by Navajo tribe members. You cannot get onto that property because it's reservation land. So you need to make reservations. And
Okay.
then the guide is paid. And then if you want to, you can tip the guide. But, we were surprised to find out. We were like, oh, so, are there any Native American stories that you can share? And he said, this area, we didn't use this area as men. We used this area only for celebration or honoring some spirits. He said this area is for the spirits. So we were under the impression that like the Native Americans had been visiting this place doing things daily, and it's not a daily place at all. It's a spiritual place and you can feel it. It's really kind of cool.
Huh, interesting. Did you with any of the parks, so obviously with Antelope Canyon you had to have a reservation. Did you have any other like have to make reservations to get into any of the national parks or have any issues with that?
So it's funny, we were doing a lot of research before we went, and that's why, for whoever's listening, research is your friend because we were able to get all of our campground reservations and we only needed reservations for arches.
Okay.
They're taking timed reservations. And of course, the Slot Canyon, you need a reservation because that's toured by the Navajo people. So, uh, but I made a reservation for 2 specific days at the same time around 10 o'clock. And it cost me a total of $4 for the carload. So
Oh
it's
wow.
not expensive. They just want to probably keep the park pristine and limit the amount of visitors per day. So if you want a ticket that day, you just go online and you pay $2 and you pick a time that works for your carload. The other way is to go prior to the park opening. You can get in early at like 7 in the morning and it's free. Or you can come in at 4 o'clock. But during the summer, I wouldn't recommend going in at
Yeah.
4. It's too hot. But we were there obviously around May 10th or 11th, I think, at that point, and it was hot. So the temperatures in Utah, it's a really interesting place because I've skied there, and it gets cold. I've
Mhm.
skied there in the spring in April, and it was like I was skiing in a t-shirt, and then of course now it's May, and it started off being in the 70s, maybe some days in the 60s when we were um, at Bryce, and then shot right up into the 90s pretty quickly
Wow.
in a matter of like a week. So you know, with the Earth, I don't know. You can't really plan things, but I would go in the spring. I would go in May or early June.
Okay.
The Narrows is one thing we didn't get to do, obviously, because of the snow runoff. But
Mhm.
maybe, you know, if you're going in the following year, you have to check the websites and see what's open.
Yeah. What sites do you usually use to research?
So we went on to the national park website just to check to see what they have to
Mhm.
say about what's open, what's closed. You know, so I went to all of that specific, like Zion website and the Bryce and the Arches. Um, we did some research from other people's blogs. Like I found out about the Navajo lands that you have to make a reservation. Some people think they can just drive on and just go into the canyon themselves, and you can't. It's against the law. You will be arrested. It's private property. You'd be trespassing. So, you know, by just researching, like, you know, how do you enter Lower Antelope Canyon, or how far a drive is it from, you know, we were in Zion. It was 2 hours. We were willing to drive the 2 hours. Some people might think that's too far. I'm telling you, it's worth it. We got to see Horseshoe Bend. Wish we could have spent some time on Lake Mead, but that's for another day. So you sort of also have to be realistic about what you can accomplish, you know. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and you know, if you are a camper and you don't mind, you know, boondocking, we never boondocked. We went to specific campsites, and there you can plug in and use their electric and water. You know, you're paying for that, and of course you can
Mhm.
dump your tanks there as well. But plenty of people just take a camper and just the Bureau of Land Management has land set aside, which you can check out their websites, and you don't have to pay anything. And so if you have the ability to use a propane tank and, you know, for heat and whatever, because it does get cold at night, you can just pull off and just pick a spot, and it's free. So it depends
Okay.
on how hardy you are.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know that that you have different options, and I don't think you would necessarily realize that if you didn't research beforehand.
Yeah. Do you have a camper, Kyle? Do you ever drive an RV?
Uh, I don't. I have definitely boondocked in my car before. Sometimes that's been intentional, sometimes not.
Oh
But
God.
uh, yeah, I have gotten to do some pretty major road trips where I've gone from campground to campground. But that's been very light packing and not using a camper or anything like that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
That was years ago back in college when I had the energy to do that.
Yeah. Well, you know what surprised me? This is my first RV. I'm going to be perfectly honest. My first RV trip. I took an RV trip just with my brother and my sister-in-law last October, and we went to southern Colorado and we did some hot springs, and we checked out um, Sand Dunes National Park, which is insane. These sand dunes pop out of nowhere in Colorado, and they're 3 miles long and ridiculously high, and people can take, they literally rent you sleds and you can sled down these sand
Oh,
dunes. So it's really fun. But there's hot springs, and again, Native American land, and you know, some people have access to them, and they have created resorts, you know, that you could go and camp in, or they actually have rooms at too. And it's a whole thing. People travel in their RVs. You would be surprised at how many retirees are out there just cruising the country in RVs and just going from place to place and seeing all these amazing things. I've talked to a couple, but and my brother and my sister-in-law are retirees. They're young, but they retired early. And um, it's just a lifestyle. You know, you just
mhm.
live and see and hike and experience and then pack up and go to the next place. And so, you know, it's a really, I just didn't realize, but there's so many people doing it. I don't know if that's because of COVID or what, but we were just, all the campgrounds we passed were just packed. People are out there and they're And it's not even, I mean, maybe some schools are out, I don't know, but it's some of it's families with young kids, and some of it's older people who are just experiencing this United States this way.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like it seems to me that it's become more popular since COVID happened, to just take off and go like that. But it's such a good way to see the US. I think you have to kind of do it that way, especially out west. I mean, you're so far, from place to place that it kind of helps to take that, a couple days and drive from place to place. And also seeing the landscape while you're driving is a trip
Yeah,
in and of itself too.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We, I was lucky to be a passenger. My husband did the driving in the C class, and I looked out the window and I was like, oh my gosh, because the landscape in Utah is just, it's all very unique. The three different parks, the four different parks I went to, five actually now, you know, even in Capitol Reef, we couldn't get out of the car. It started hailing and there was lightning and thunder. So we just did a quick stop and saw the petroglyphs. But there's so much to see at Capitol Reef. We're definitely like the Chimney Rocks and the Hickman Bridge Arch. We couldn't see any of that because we didn't feel safe getting out of the car. And that's another thing, you have to be careful of weather, flash floods, lightning, storms. If you are in doubt, don't, right? So don't get out, don't hike. It's, but we could drive through it and we saw these rock formations from the car, and you're just like, holy cow. It looks fake. It looks like a movie set.
Yeah. Yeah, some of these places are just, I mean, I can't even fathom how, it's taken millions and millions of years to create, this amazing landscape.
And it's always changing because even in the 1990s, in Arches, there was a rock slide. And so this arch, they call it landscape arch. It was thicker and larger. It's the largest arch in the park. And now it's like a thin little bridge. So things are, it's still an arch and it's still people go to see, but it changed in the 90s. So, these parks are ever evolving. You're going to see it and then maybe 10 years later go back and there might be something that happened that changed the look of something.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I feel like we saw it, but we could make another trip to go back in a couple of years, and especially to go to the Narrows and go to Angel's Landing, and at Zion. There's something at every park that we could have. We only did like 2 or 3 days in each park, so you could spend 3 or 4 days in each park easily. So
Yeah.
it's just what
Do you
you're
feel,
for.
yeah, do you feel like having 2 to 3 days per park was a good way to go, or do you wish that you could have been able to spend 3 to 4 days per park?
So, some of the parks are smaller than others. Like at Arches, we saw a lot of it because they do allow you to drive in your own car, and they do tell you the different sites you can see, and you can see a lot of it just from the car. Of course, we hike to everything. Arches is the park you could easily do in 2 days. I wish I had more time. Obviously at Capitol Reef, I didn't get to see anything, but the Canyonlands, again, that's right near Arches. We only did a day in Canyonlands, and we would probably need another two days. So I think 2 to 3 days per park is good, knowing that you might not get to see everything, especially if you have bad weather.
Yeah. Okay. Did you feel like it was pretty easy to, in terms of time and energy, to go from place to place, and just did you feel rushed at all to get to all the parks, to fit within the time constraint of your trip?
So it's a great question because, like I said, my brother, my sister-in-law are retirees. My husband is not. So he had a time limit because he couldn't just take off for more than a week and a half. But so we did, from the 3rd to basically to the 15th. So a little bit more than 10 days. And, one of the parks, it was long drives. So I would
Mhm.
say, if you have 2 weeks to give yourself time, to explore, like we didn't get a chance to explore Moab, which is a city right next to Arches. It looks like there was a lot of good shopping there, a lot of good restaurants. So we were at Arches for 3 nights. And one of the days we explored Canyonlands. That's easy to get to from Arches. So, if you want to do it a little bit more leisurely, I think maybe 4 days in each place, 3 to 4 days. But we're tired. We definitely did do boom, 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 but we loved it. You sort of get energized. I feel energized, like can't wait to get to the next place, kind of a thing. And so on the last day, when we were in Arches, we said goodbye to my brother and my sister-in-law. They drove into Colorado, and we drove 4 hours back towards the first park, towards Zion. And 4 hours, and then it was pretty bad weather. So, it's you just got to push through because you have a time limit. So I think you have to make sure to allow at least a week and a half to see all 5.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have plans to go back to those parks or go to any other parks this year?
So, like I said, as soon as we got back, we were talking about how much we want to visit Alaska. And so I think there is a national park in Alaska that's in my future. We haven't created that itinerary yet, but we really want to check out Alaska. So would we return? Yeah, we want to return to finish up some of the things in the Utah parks we didn't get a chance, like the Narrows and Angel's Landing, at Zion, and, at Arches, I think we pretty much covered it, but we would go back to Canyonlands. We didn't even scratch the surface. And then, of course, we didn't even see Capitol Reef. So at some point, we will definitely, we drove through Capitol Reef. So we saw the landscape. It was fabulous. But, if you're flexible and you can stay an extra day, if you lose a day due to weather, if you're a retiree or if you have an unlimited, if you're like, a digital nomad or something, but and inevitably the trip, all good things must end, and the trip had to end. So we definitely will go back and check out the stuff we missed.
Oh, okay. Out of all the parks you've been to, not just on this trip, but overall, which one would you say is your favorite?
I'm gonna have to say, and I know it's funny, we were in Montana. I was on a press trip at on Flathead Lake. And, I loved it. We went into Glacier National Park. And so even though I saw some amazing things in Utah and I thought mind blowing, Glacier right now is still my number one. Although I did love Yellowstone. It's just so hard, right? Because earlier I asked you the same question, and for different reasons. And Glacier, I was there in May, and of course the Going to the Sun Road was closed. So we only got to do like Lake McDonald and some short hikes up from Lake McDonald. So Montana is definitely a place I'm going to have to go back to. And of course, then I don't know what I don't know. So I haven't seen any other national parks like in Alaska, and I have not been to Yosemite yet. So much to see, so little time.
Yeah. Right.
But I would have to say Glacier.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I know it's like, and like we were talking about, once you get back, you're like, oh, there's 2 more things that I got to go see now, and that's never gets shorter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, outside of national park travel, I know you have kind of a food and wine blog that you do as well. What have been some of your trips that have revolved around that?
Oh gosh. Well, I I mean, I loved Seattle I was there for Taste of Washington.
Okay.
And I was blown away by Woodinville, which is an area where you can literally drive to. And even though the AVAs are further away, all of the tasting rooms, you can get a full taste of Washington right there in Woodinville, which is maybe like an hour and a half drive from Seattle. I don't think it was very far. And so, like normally when you go to like a Napa, you're right there and you're tasting the wines that are grown right there. But
Mhm.
in Woodinville, you get to taste all of the Washington wines. There's tasting rooms from every AVA there. So I thought that was really, really great. It was a great for me to have that food and culinary experience. We got to try. Um, there's a chef, Brendan McGill, who resides on Bainbridge Island, and he has several restaurants, both on Bainbridge and then in Seattle. And his sustainability philosophy, the way he cooks, the way he harvests, I think the chefs in Seattle are doing amazing work protecting the ocean and protecting and just, using what's in season and not
Mhm.
creating more of a footprint, a culinary footprint than they have to. So I think the food coming out of these restaurants is just sensational, especially if you like.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Lots of good seafood up in Seattle for sure. What about other parts of the country? Has there been any other places that have really stood out to you in terms of food or wine or anything like that?
Well, I have been to Mississippi. They call it the Secret Coast. I didn't know what to expect because I had never explored Mississippi, and I took a road trip um, on the Secret Coast. Biloxi and um,
Mhm.
Ocean Springs, and I started off, in Bay St. Louis. I can't believe the culinary scene there. The shrimp, the heritage, like it's kind of influenced by Louisiana, so it's kind of Cajun, but then it's Southern. So yeah, I mean, I have to say I've had great meals all over the country, but Mississippi does it right, the South does it right, and of course I'm a New Yorker, so I've gone to like 5-star restaurants. I've eaten at a hot dog stand. So it just depends on what you're looking for. And if you want some great street food, New York has amazing street food. Um, I mean, I've been to the Rockies in Colorado. I've been to, Montana. Everywhere you go, you sort of have to embrace what it is they're doing, like eating game. And in Jackson Hole, we had ostrich, we had buffalo, we had, so you just sort of, if you're adventurous, you just sort of say, what is it that this state offers and what are we going to try here? And you just have to embrace it. It's amazing.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's such a good way to think about it. Like when you're traveling, it's important to embrace, what the local culture is and the food and the drinks and just experience it. And if you don't like it, you don't like it, whatever. But I think it's always good to at least try and understand and see where, people are coming from and how their culture got to where it is today.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, well, very cool. Any other like travels that have really stood out to you over the years?
Well, I mean, I go on a lot of trips personally, and then I've been lucky enough to write travel pieces where places where would be like, I want to showcase what we have. Come visit us. I got to go to Anguilla. It's the British West Indies. It's an island not far from Saint Martin. I loved Anguilla. It's not for everybody because there's not. It's just pristine beauty. The beaches are fabulous, but it's the culinary capital of the Caribbean.
Hmm.
And of course, they have the spiny lobster, and they have this unbelievable culture of warmth and hospitality. So it's not in the United States, but I mean, I flew from Miami to St. Martin and then took just kind of like a quick short boat ride from St. Martin over to Anguilla. I thought the hotels were magnificent. It's a 5-star experience, but they also have more reasonable lodging. But the beaches were insane. If you're a beach person, the sand, the water, the sky. They even have this place called Sandy Cay where you literally take a boat out for the day. And it's the shifting quay where they've put up a shack where they serve, food, and they have music and they have snorkeling, and it's just you go out there for the day.
Hmm.
So insane. It was just in the middle of the ocean, and not far from the actual shore, maybe about a 10-minute boat ride, but just sitting out there.
Yeah, that sounds like a blast.
Yeah, yeah, and great snorkeling, beautiful fish. So, I mean, I've been pretty lucky. I have to say, it's been a good gig.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, what different publications do you write for?
So, the main publication I write for is Travel Awaits. It's a 45
Okay.
travel blog with over 8 million views. But I also write for a food publication called Foodie Flashpacker. I write for uh, different publications that the cafe offers. I don't know if you're in the cafe, Kyle,
Mhm.
but I've written for the IFTWA magazine, Food, Wine, and Travel, Travel by Vacation Rental, Rovology. And I just wrote for a print publication. I have to put that out. I did a hike in Rocky Mountain National Park with a great guide. And so weekend extended weekend getaways, just published a piece of mine on a great snowshoe. So in my age group, I'm in my 50s and I still want to be an active traveler. So I try to look for publications that reader would be interested in learning about things in that age group because, you know, everyone wants to go to all these cool places, but can you really do, you really want to
Mhm.
know what that age group, my age group is doing. And there's a lot of active people in their 50s doing lots of wonderful things like hiking and exploring. And, you just have to get out there.
Yeah, definitely. I know. Actually, that reminds me. My mom, she last year went to Moab, and they did. Her and a bunch of girls in their 50s and 60s did a mountain biking trip
That's awesome.
in that area. Like that sounds a lot of fun. I don't even know if I could do that, but kudos to you.
Good for her.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many fun things out there and so many experiences that you can have. I feel like if you put in the time to research and plan it out, that you can kind of create any trip that you're looking for.
Yeah, and if you have to be flexible too. So,
Definitely.
we went to Capitol Reef thinking we were going to spend the day there, and then quickly realized that wasn't happening. So, you sort of say to yourself, well, what can I do? And then you do what you can, and if you can't, then it's better to be safe when you're doing these kinds of things. So, I just think just be flexible.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, Jeanine, I got a question for you. What is like your number one bucket list destination that you haven't been to yet that you want to go to?
I think it's Japan.
Japan. Why Japan?
My nephew studied abroad in Japan, and he came back with such a love of the culture and shared that with us. And my brother and my sister-in-law, the couple that I just traveled with last week, they went to visit him. He was there studying abroad when he was in college, and they took an epic, like, basically 14-day trip into various areas of Japan, and just their experience. I love the culture. I want to learn more about it. So I think that's a bucket list. But Kyle, every time somebody asks me, I mean, Japan is a bucket list because I know it's kind of on the back burner right now. But
Mm.
gosh, you could call me tomorrow and I'd say, I really want to go to Australia, or I really want to go. So it's hard, but right now that's really kind of tops on my first bucket list. I'm going to get there.
Yeah, I like it. I think that one is towards the top of my list as well, for
Cool.
sure. Well, Janine, anything else that you want to share in regards to your travels or your writing or anything like that?
No, I just feel like, if you have the desire, it's just sad to me to see that like a lot of people don't use their vacation days. I had a traditional job, where I was working 9 to 5, and, every chance I got, I took my vacation. So if I could just leave your, listeners with one piece of advice is take that vacation time.
Yeah.
Life is long and short, and you got to fill it with wow moments, so get
Mhm.
out there.
Yeah, and who knows, what will happen tomorrow. So,
Right.
take that opportunity if you have it for sure.
Yeah. Hmm.
Awesome. Well, Janine, thank you so much. I appreciate the time. I really enjoyed hearing about your travels, and I look forward to seeing you somewhere around the world soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, Kyle. I had a lot of fun.
Good. Glad to hear it. Well,
Take
have a
care.
good one, and I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye. Hey everybody, Kyle here. If you enjoyed today's show and want more, you can always check out every episode on Spotify, Anchor, YouTube, and now Amazon Music as well. Just search for Our Travel Experiences on any of those platforms and it will pop up. You can also find everything all in one place on my website, ourtravelexp.com. And if you want to see my travel pictures as well as travel pictures from guests on the show, you can check them out on Instagram. The page is called Our Travel Experiences Podcast. And if you want to share your own pictures on the Instagram page or be a guest on the podcast, you can message me via that Instagram page or email me at ourtravelexperiences@outlook.com. I would love to see your pictures and hear about your travel experiences, so please send them my way. And if that isn't enough for you, make sure to check out my weekly YouTube show, From Around the World Fridays. Every Friday, I'm taking 5 to 10 minutes to answer questions from listeners, share some souvenirs that I bought over the years, share my postcards over the years that I've accumulated, or share videos and pictures from one particular city or country that I visited, and so much more. So check it out, guys. You won't be disappointed. And make sure you go subscribe to that as well. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you somewhere around the world soon.